Went low contact with my parents after they enabled my sister's entitled behavior and dismissed my struggles with chronic illness. I'm 32F, my sister Gemma is 22F, and our parents are in their 60s. We're Korean Canadian, and as the eldest daughter of immigrants, there's a whole cultural layer that shapes how everything unfolds. It all unraveled over the last few months, and honestly, I'm still processing. I live in Vancouver, where the cost of living is out of control. Gemma graduated from UBC this year, with no real plans for grad school or a job. She just wanted to hang around town for a few weeks before heading off to travel in Korea. Since her timeline was vague, she told both me and our dad that she'd be crashing with her friend Tanya for a while. But then, during a call with mom, she suddenly dropped that Gemma would need to stay at my place, the one-bedroom plus den condo, that my parents actually own. I told mom that wasn't the plan, because Gemma had said she was staying with Tanya. Nothing more from Gemma, no updates, no texts. She was already somewhere else when all this was going down. So a week passes. I figure I should check in, so I text Gemma to see what the deal is. Does she still need to stay at mine? She replies with a lukewarm, I guess. I assume she'll give me some warning. Nope. The very next day, while I'm out, she uses Find My Friends to check my location and just moves in, without asking, throwing out one of my boxes to make room for her stuff. When I call her out for barging in and tossing my things, mom calls me to scream at me for being a bad host. That first week and a half under one roof? I was doing almost everything: chores, laundry, buying groceries and takeout, cooking most meals, and handling all of Gemma's nonsense. She didn't pack properly, so the den, living room, kitchen, everywhere, were piled up with tote bags, boxes, and suitcases. She's never been made to do chores. Meanwhile, growing up, even when I was sick and throwing up, it was me who had to do the dishes. All this while I was stressed from starting a new job, and Gemma, unemployed, was out partying with her friends until 2 a.m., waking me up every time she got home, then acting all put out if I dared make a noise before 10 a.m. Our dad flew in for Gemma's graduation ceremony and stayed the first night at the condo too, before moving to a hotel. Gemma breezed in from another night out at 11 p.m. and muttered something about needing to meet friends at 6. I asked, oh, 6 a.m. or p.m.? And she barked at me, none of your business. It's a tiny condo, a 6 a.m. wake up affects me too. Dad took the den, so Gemma took my pull-out couch. I set up blankets and sheets for her, but she just refused to lift a finger, throwing a tantrum until 1 a.m. while I did everything. Next morning, she blasted up at 6 a.m., waking Dad and me, and I dragged through work exhausted, head pounding when I finally got home, only to find another mess waiting. Gemma wasn't packed for the hotel, and Dad tried to help by cramming her stuff into my tote bags. I even lent her my new suitcase. She pitched a fit at both of us and stormed out, Dad in tow. At this point, I'd already volunteered to pick up graduation flowers for her. But by the evening, overwhelmed with chores, barely any information about the ceremony, my head splitting open from fatigue, I finally snapped a text at 9 p.m., letting her know how fed up I was feeling, and asked which outfit she liked, what color flowers she wanted. Her only reply? That I was annoying for being in her business, and to forget it. Still, I got up early, bought the flowers, spent a day of PTO at her graduation, lugging my DSLR to take nice photos, for her, not me, and pushed through a whole afternoon on my feet, until my back was screaming. I used to be a pretty decent photographer, even shot for big brands like KFC and Samsung in my earlier 20s, but then I had a bad accident and now chronic fatigue sometimes takes me out for days, so this wasn't easy. After the ceremony, I went back to the condo to rest. Later, we regrouped for dinner at a restaurant. I even skipped out on a concert of my favorite artist to be there for Gemma. The evening started out pleasant enough, just chatting. Earlier, Gemma had told me some of her friends were getting into photography, so they were bringing their nice cameras. I made it a point to compliment their photos. So at dinner, I say, it looked like your friends had some really cool cameras. Without missing a beat, Gemma snaps back, they already have photography businesses, unlike you. I was stunned. Trying to keep it light, I said, okay, I was just going by what you said before. And she comes back, well, they're actually talented at photography. I blinked at her, I don't think I'm too shabby either, I shot for KFC and Samsung. She shot me down with, yeah, well, you're 30. I pointed out, I was 23 when I did those shoots. Then she kept hammering on, well, brands have invited them to travel the world shooting since they were 18. Trying to diffuse the tension, I said, Gemma, you don't have to put me down just to talk up your friends. She screeched, you insulted my friends. And Dad just sat there, silent, as I excused myself, stunned and humiliated. In the bathroom, I texted Mom, just baffled and hurt, then called my best friend, who was equally baffled. When I came back, Gemma screamed at me again for insulting her friends, then stomped out and disappeared to the hotel. Dad told me I was just overly sensitive, that I was probably acting out because I'd given up photography after my accident and was overreacting. A few days later, Father's Day, Dad had booked a 3-bedroom Airbnb cottage for the weekend getaway. I wasn't even going to go, but, knowing Dad and Gemma are completely hopeless with logistics, I pulled myself together, Arranged, the car rental, packed road trip snacks, printed out directions. By that time Gemma was staying with a friend. Waiting for the Uber in my condo lobby with Dad, I started tearing up. Dad saw me, snapped, "What's the matter now?" I told him, "I've suspected for years that Gemma's the favorite, but these last few days made it crystal clear." He said nothing, just stepped outside. At the Airbnb, there's a master with a queen bed and 2 smaller single rooms. Dad offers the master to Gemma, who accepts without a word. I finally say something. Dad should have the master, it's Father's Day, and he's driving, so he needs to rest. We go hiking. Gemma ignores me the whole time. After dinner, Dad sits us down on the living room couch and says, "It's really not a big deal. The two of you, shake hands and be good sisters." Gemma stomps. Dad and Gemma walked into the master bedroom, and soon enough, Gemma started crying. Immediately, Dad switched into comfort mode, completely different from how he'd just spoken to me, and offered to take her on a walk. Left alone, I picked up a book and tried to distract myself. An hour later, the two of them returned, but again, they isolated themselves in the master bedroom, this time firing up Dad's laptop to look at flights to the Bahamas. At this point, the message was loud and clear: I was invisible, utterly ignored. Feeling abandoned, I retreated to my assigned room, the smallest one, and cried myself to sleep, my rest disturbed throughout the night by painful flare-ups from my chronic condition. The following day, we went on a hike and stopped for lunch on the way back to Vancouver. I tried to be civil, I offered Gemma snacks, but she acted like I didn't exist. When I suggested a little toast for Father's Day, she ignored me entirely and only cheers at Dad. I offered to share my dish at lunch, she acted like my words were empty air, then turned around and offered hers to Dad alone. When it was time to drop her off, she threw another tantrum. This time, she'd left her shoes in the trunk and demanded we go back. A few days later, Dad had to fly out again. By this time, my chronic fatigue had me completely wiped out. I hadn't managed a proper meal in days. Migraine pain kept me bedridden, just trying to make it to the next moment. I finally got on the phone with Mom, who had been ignoring my messages ever since graduation dinner. All she said was, "How's it going?" I tried to be honest, "I'm not doing too great right now." Immediately, she snapped back, "You're still upset about the other night? You're being so petty." I couldn't believe it. Before I could say more, she excused herself. "Oh wait, I have to go, Gemma's calling me." I finally let my feelings show, saying, "Yeah, because Gemma's always the priority." An hour later, Mom called me back. She launched into a long update about Gemma's flight to Korea, all the fancy hotel arrangements our wealthy relatives were helping her with, and even which suitcase Gemma should pack. I felt too sick and too raw to hear all the details about Gemma, again, and asked if we were even going to talk about what happened. That provoked a meltdown. She started yelling, accusing me of being stubborn, of always needing to be right, of criticizing her parenting style. The irony was palpable because she'd only listened to Gemma's side. She blamed me for keeping Gemma awake late, for Gemma's new cold while staying with Tanya, all of it suddenly my fault. I just snapped, "Okay, everything is my fault. I'm wrong about everything. Have a good night." But after a few minutes, I couldn't bear the idea of leaving it like that and called her back. She just brushed me off, saying she was tired and didn't want to talk, then hung up. I didn't know who else to reach out to, so I texted Dad. I was shocked, I said. I asked if he was free to talk. He told me he was too busy, couldn't talk that night. The next night, busy again, he was catching up with a friend on Zoom. The next day, doctor's appointment. The day after? He fell asleep early. Then he had to show visitors around the city. During all of this, I kept trying to contact Mom, to get through to her. I sent her the screenshots of Gemma's texts, showing it was her waking me up at night, not the other way around. No answer. I told her I was hurt, that I noticed how deeply she worried about Gemma's minor cold, but hadn't asked if I, her other child, was okay, even though I hadn't eaten a proper meal in a week and was surviving off yogurt. Silence. I texted a photo of myself clutching a bucket from nausea, on the verge of throwing up. Still nothing. Eventually, the symptoms drove me to the hospital. I was there not just because my body was failing, but because I was in pieces from heartbreak. Neither of my parents appeared to care at all about how I was doing. I remember having to ask the ER staff to change my emergency contact to a friend, instead of my parents, a reality I wouldn't wish on anyone. Dad finally rescheduled his life to fly out to Korea, to be with Gemma. He covered her hotels and transportation for the beginning of her trip. He said he'd help me figure things out with Mom after he returned, but he didn't know when that would be because he booked an open-ended ticket. Mom tried calling me a few times, but I haven't felt ready to talk after everything that happened, and deep down, I know she won't want to talk about what really matters anyway. In the weeks since all this, I've started looking back at our childhood and I keep noticing just how huge the differences have always been in the ways we're treated. Dad got back to Canada recently. He texted a handful of times, but I didn't answer. At this point, it's clear I've always been at the very bottom of his list, and I have to draw some boundaries for my own mental and physical health. Eventually, he insisted we talk, so today we finally did. The conversation dragged on for hours, but in the end, he said that I'm the one hurting the family with my behavior. That I'm being too sensitive about what happened at dinner, that I'm the one hurting mom by not picking up her calls, and that overall, I'm just being petty and immature. Update 1. It's been 3 weeks since my last post, and honestly, I'm still reeling from everything that's happened. Thank you to everyone who reached out, your support helped me realize I wasn't losing my mind. After that awful phone call with Dad where he basically blamed me for hurting the family, I went completely no contact. I blocked both parents on everything and focused on healing. My chronic fatigue started improving once the stress died down, and I even managed to eat actual meals again. But then last Tuesday, my aunt, Mom's sister, showed up at my condo unannounced. Aunt Linda and I have always been close, she's like the mother I wish I had. She looked absolutely devastated when I opened the door. "We need to talk," she said, and I knew something was seriously wrong. What she told me next completely shattered everything I thought I knew about my family. Apparently, there's been family drama brewing for months that I knew nothing about. Gemma had been confiding in our cousin Sarah, Linda's daughter, about some family secret that was eating at her. Sarah finally broke and told Linda everything last week. Here's the bombshell: Gemma isn't Dad's biological daughter. Linda explained that Mom had an affair when I was 10, right around the time our parents were going through that rough patch I vaguely remember. Dad found out when Gemma was about 2, but they decided to stay together and never tell anyone. The guilt has apparently been destroying Mom ever since, and Dad? Well, Dad's been overcompensating by treating Gemma like a princess to prove he loves her just as much. But here's where it gets worse. The affair was with Dad's younger brother, my Uncle Kevin, who moved to Australia shortly after Gemma was born and has barely been in touch since. Linda said Gemma has suspected something for years because people always comment on how she looks nothing like Dad but is the spitting image of Kevin. I sat there in complete shock. Suddenly, everything made sense. The favoritism, the way Mom panics whenever Gemma is upset, Dad's weird guilt-ridden behavior, why they've always treated me like I'm just less important. Linda also dropped another bomb. Apparently, during Gemma's recent Korea trip, she met some extended family who made comments about her resemblance to Kevin. She confronted Mom over video call, and Mom finally broke down and admitted everything. That's why Dad rushed over there, not just to support Gemma's vacation, but for damage control. But wait, it gets messier. Gemma is apparently furious, not just about the lie, but because she's always resented the pressure to be Dad's perfect daughter when she knew something was off. According to Sarah, Gemma has been acting out for years as a way to test if Dad would still love her if she wasn't perfect. The partying, the entitlement, the way she treats me, it's all been her twisted way of pushing boundaries. And here's the kicker, she's been taking her anger out on me because I'm Dad's real daughter, and in her mind, I'm the reason the family had to live this lie. She sees me as a constant reminder of what she's not. Linda also revealed that Mom has been having panic attacks since I went no contact. She's terrified I'll cut them off completely once I learn the truth, because she knows they've treated me horribly while overcompensating for their guilt about Gemma. The whole family has been walking on eggshells, trying to keep this secret while dealing with Gemma's increasingly erratic behavior. Apparently, she's been threatening to expose everything and destroy the family if she doesn't get what she wants. I honestly don't know how to process this. On one hand, I finally understand why I've felt like an outsider my entire life. On the other hand, I'm furious that their guilt and lies resulted in decades of emotional neglect and parentification. Linda thinks I deserve to know the truth, but she's also worried about what happens next. Gemma is supposedly planning to come back from Korea early, and she's not in a good headspace. Mom has been begging Linda to convince me to answer her calls because she wants to explain everything before Gemma gets back. But honestly, I'm not ready for that conversation. Part of me wants to maintain no contact and let them all deal with the mess they created. Another part of me is curious to hear what Mom could possibly say to justify 22 years of treating me like a second-class daughter, because of her affair. Dad texted yesterday asking if we can meet for coffee. I haven't responded yet. The weirdest part is that I almost feel bad for Gemma now. She spent her whole life sensing she didn't belong, and it's manifested in some really toxic ways. But that doesn't excuse how she's treated me, especially when I had no idea what was going on. I keep thinking about all those times I wondered what was wrong with me, why I wasn't good enough, why everything was always my fault. Turns out, I was just the collateral damage in their family secret. I have no idea what I'm going to do next. My therapist says I should take all the time I need before making any decisions about contact. But this secret is clearly not staying buried much longer, and I'm dreading whatever explosion is coming when Gemma gets back. Has anyone else dealt with discovering a family secret this big? I feel like I'm grieving the family I thought I had while trying to figure out if there's anything worth salvaging. Update 2. It's been 2 months since I learned the truth about Gemma, and I thought the worst was behind me. I was wrong. So incredibly wrong. After Aunt Linda's visit, I decided to meet Dad for that coffee. I figured I owed it to myself to hear his side before making any permanent decisions about contact. We met at a quiet cafe downtown, and for the first time in my life, I saw my father cry. He broke down completely, admitting that learning about Mom's affair with his own brother nearly destroyed him. But what really got to me was when he said, "I know I failed you." I was so terrified of resenting Gemma for something that wasn't her fault that I overcompensated. And in doing that, I neglected the daughter who never asked for any of this mess. It felt like the apology I'd been waiting my entire life to hear. We talked for hours, and for the first time, I felt like I had a real relationship with my dad. He promised things would be different, that he wanted to make up for lost time. I was cautiously hopeful. Then Gemma came back from Korea. She'd been radio silent for weeks, but the day she landed, my phone exploded with texts. Not from her directly, from mutual friends, distant relatives, even my old high school acquaintances. Gemma had posted a massive Instagram story blast, complete with family photos and a detailed caption exposing everything. The affair, the paternity secret, how the family had been living a lie, all of it, public for everyone to see. But here's where it gets absolutely insane. She didn't just expose the secret. She completely twisted the narrative. According to Gemma's version, I had always known about her paternity and had been holding it over the family to get special treatment. She claimed I was the one who'd been manipulating our parents with guilt, and that I'd been emotionally abusing her our entire lives by flaunting my status as Dad's biological daughter. She painted herself as the victim who'd finally found the courage to speak her truth against her narcissistic older sister. The comments were brutal. People I'd known for years were calling me manipulative, fake, a master gaslighter. My work colleagues started looking at me strangely. A few friends reached out asking if her story was true, but most just stopped talking to me altogether. I was devastated, but that was nothing compared to what came next. 3 days after her social media explosion, I got a call from my landlord. Apparently, someone had contacted him claiming to be concerned about my mental health and suggesting I was dangerous and unstable. They'd sent him screenshots of Gemma's posts along with what they claimed were concerning messages I'd supposedly sent. The screenshots were fake, elaborate text conversations that looked like they came from my number, filled with threats and unhinged rants about the family situation. Someone had gone to incredible lengths to make them look authentic, complete with the right timestamps and phone number formatting. My landlord was legally obligated to investigate, and while he didn't evict me, the whole thing created this horrible cloud of suspicion. I had to provide character references and submit to wellness checks. The humiliation was unbearable. But wait, it gets worse. Last week, I found out who was behind the fake screenshots. It wasn't Gemma. It was Mom. Aunt Linda came to me absolutely shaking with rage. Apparently, Mom had confessed everything during a family dinner. In her twisted logic, she thought that if she could make me look unstable and vindictive, it would discredit anything I might say about how the family had treated me. She wanted to protect Gemma from any potential backlash by making me the villain of the story. When Linda confronted her, Mom broke down and admitted she'd been so consumed with guilt over the affair and the years of favoritism that she convinced herself I was going to destroy the family out of revenge. She'd created this elaborate persecution fantasy where I was the threat, rather than facing the reality that she'd emotionally neglected one daughter while overindulging the other. The most twisted part? She'd been working with Gemma on this character assassination campaign. They'd been planning it throughout Gemma's Korea trip, crafting the narrative together. The social media post, the fake texts, even reaching out to my landlord, it was all coordinated. Dad claims he knew nothing about Mom's scheme with the fake messages, and honestly, I believe him. When he found out, he moved out of the house immediately and is staying with his sister. He's talking about divorce, but here's the thing that's really messing with my head, I almost feel sorry for Mom. Linda told me that Mom had convinced herself she was protecting her family by eliminating the threat she perceived me to be. Years of guilt and anxiety had apparently warped her thinking to the point where she genuinely believed I was some kind of vindictive mastermind planning to destroy everyone. The fake messages have been reported to the police as harassment, though I'm not sure I want to press charges against my own mother. But the damage to my reputation is already done. Half the people in my social circle think I'm some manipulative psychopath, and the other half are tiptoeing around me like I'm made of glass. Gemma, meanwhile, has been posting cryptic Instagram stories about toxic family members and setting boundaries with abusers. She's managed to maintain her victim narrative even after her collaboration with Mom came to light. The strangest part of all this is that Dad and I are actually closer now than we've ever been. He's been helping me deal with the legal aspects of the harassment, and he's been genuinely supportive in a way he never was during my childhood. It's like it took almost losing his entire family for him to realize what actually mattered. But I'm struggling with what to do next. Part of me wants to expose the truth about Mom and Gemma's campaign against me, but another part of me just wants to disappear and start over somewhere new. The whole situation has left me questioning everything I thought I knew about family, loyalty, and forgiveness. I've been staying with a friend while I figure things out, but I can't hide forever. Mom has been trying to reach me through various relatives, claiming she wants to make amends, but how do you make amends for trying to systematically destroy your own daughter's life? The worst part is that some tiny, broken part of me still wants a relationship with my family. Even after everything, I find myself missing the mother I thought I had, grieving for the sister I never really knew. But I don't know if there's any way back from this kind of betrayal. I have a therapy session tomorrow to help process all of this, but right now, I honestly don't know what my next move should be. Update 3. It's been 6 weeks since my last update, and I honestly thought the chaos was finally settling down. Dad had moved in with his sister, divorce papers were filed, and I was slowly rebuilding my life with the help of therapy and a few loyal friends who saw through Gemma's social media campaign. Then Uncle Kevin showed up. I was grabbing coffee near my office when this guy approached me, tall, dark hair, looked familiar but I couldn't place him. "You're definitely your father's daughter," he said with this weird smile. "I'm Kevin. Your uncle." "Gemma's." "Well, her biological father." My blood turned to ice. After 22 years in Australia, Kevin had decided to fly back to Vancouver. Apparently, Gemma had been messaging him for months, and her public Instagram explosion had been the final straw. He wanted to set the record straight and meet his daughter properly. But here's where it gets absolutely insane. Kevin had no idea about the fake text messages or mom's harassment campaign against me. When I told him what had happened, his face went white. Turns out, mom had been sending him money for years. Not just small amounts, we're talking thousands of dollars annually, supposedly for keeping quiet about the affair. Kevin was furious. He thought the money was guilt payments for the affair itself, but when he realized mom had been using their secret to systematically destroy me while building up Gemma, something in him snapped. He drove straight to mom's house for what he called a long overdue conversation. What happened next, I found out from dad, who got a panicked call from his sister-in-law around midnight. Kevin had confronted mom, and she'd completely broken down, not the calculated manipulation I'd seen from her recently, but a total psychological collapse. She'd been hospitalized for what the doctors called acute stress reaction. But that's not even the craziest part. While Kevin was at the house, Gemma showed up. She'd been staying with friends since coming back from Korea, but apparently she'd been planning this whole reunion scenario where Kevin would whisk her away to Australia for a fresh start away from all the toxic family drama. Kevin told me later that meeting Gemma in person was one of the most disturbing experiences of his life. She immediately started trying to manipulate him, talking about how she'd always felt the connection and how she deserved better than this family of liars. When Kevin didn't immediately offer to take her to Australia, she lost it completely. She started screaming about how unfair it was that I got to have dad while she got nothing, how she'd spent her whole life competing with a golden child who never had to earn love. Then, and this is where Kevin says he saw mom's influence crystal clear, Gemma started making threats. If Kevin didn't help her start over in Australia, she'd expose him to his wife and kids there. She'd already done the research, found their social media profiles, knew where they lived. Kevin's been married in Australia for 15 years. His wife knows nothing about the affair or Gemma's existence. Gemma was essentially trying to blackmail him into choosing her over the family he'd built for himself. That's when Kevin called dad and asked him to come over immediately. By the time dad arrived, Gemma had trashed part of mom's living room and was threatening to burn down everyone's life if she didn't get what she wanted. Dad had to physically restrain her while Kevin called 911. Gemma was admitted to the same hospital as mom, but in the psychiatric wing for evaluation. The police are treating it as a mental health crisis rather than criminal behavior, but there's now a paper trail of her threats and destructive actions. I found all this out when dad called me at 2 a.m., completely shaken. For the first time, he was seeing Gemma's behavior for what it really was, not the acting out of a confused young woman, but genuine psychological instability that had been enabled and encouraged by mom's guilt for over 2 decades. Kevin stayed in Vancouver for another week, and we actually had several long conversations. He's not a monster, just a guy who made a terrible mistake 22 years ago and then ran away from the consequences. He told me that mom had been painting him as the villain all these years, claiming he'd seduced her and then abandoned Gemma. The truth was messier. They'd both been drunk, both been having problems in their relationships, and both made a catastrophic decision that destroyed multiple families. But here's what really got to me. Kevin said he'd always wondered about me. Mom's money came with updates about Gemma's life, but I was barely mentioned. When he'd ask about me, mom would brush it off, saying I was fine and independent. He had no idea I'd been parentified, neglected, or emotionally abused. In his mind, I was the lucky one who got to have a normal relationship with dad. Kevin offered to help me in whatever way he could, including providing testimony about mom's payments and manipulation if I decided to take legal action. But he also made it clear that he couldn't be a permanent part of my life. His family in Australia is his priority, and Gemma's threats have made him realize how dangerous this situation could become for them. Before he left, Kevin did something that completely blindsided me. He asked if I wanted to know about my biological cousin, his oldest son, who's actually close to my age. Apparently, this kid is a photographer too, has been running his own business for years. Kevin thought we might have some things in common, and he'd be willing to facilitate a connection if I was interested. I'm still processing that. Part of me is curious about having family who might actually understand me, but another part of me is terrified of opening that door. What if Kevin's Australian family is just as dysfunctional? What if reaching out puts them in danger from Gemma? Speaking of Gemma, she was released from the hospital after a 72-hour hold, but with mandatory outpatient therapy and a restraining order that keeps her away from me, dad, and Kevin's family. She's been staying with a friend, but dad heard through family channels that she's been spiraling, posting increasingly erratic content online, alienating the friends who were supporting her, talking about exposing more family secrets. Mom is still hospitalized. The doctors say her breakdown was years in the making, the guilt, the lies, the constant stress of managing everyone's emotions while neglecting her own mental health. Dad visits her sometimes, but he's committed to the divorce. He says he can't trust her anymore, and honestly, I don't blame him. The weirdest part of all this is that Dad and I are building something that feels like a real father-daughter relationship for the first time in my life. Without the weight of family secrets and mom's manipulation, we're actually getting to know each other. He's been helping me apartment hunt. I finally decided to move out of that condo, too many bad memories, and we have dinner together once a week, but I'm still struggling with what to do about the bigger picture. My reputation in Vancouver is slowly recovering as people realize how elaborate the lies were, but some relationships are permanently damaged. I've been thinking about taking Kevin up on his offer to help me relocate. Maybe a fresh start somewhere else would be better. The therapist says I need to focus on my own healing rather than trying to fix or understand everyone else's dysfunction. But it's hard when I keep waiting for the next shoe to drop. Gemma is still out there, still angry, and still has access to social media. Mom will eventually be released from the hospital, and who knows what state of mind she'll be in. Sometimes I wonder if this is what it feels like to survive a natural disaster. You're grateful to be alive, but you're also waiting for the aftershocks that might bring everything crashing down again. I have a job interview next week in Toronto. Maybe it's time for that fresh start after all.